Greetings, Saberites. Anonymous here, and we are here with a little panel to give a little talk about some stuff as we are in a holding pattern for trials and getting students in. So all of you people out there who are working on your stuff, as far as getting becoming members here, keep working. It's only about a week away, and we will get started. But in the meantime, we decided to gather for a little discussion about some of the stuff that's been happening in the Star Wars universe, but we haven't been able to get to it because of all of the COVID stuff and all that kind of thing. And that's gonna get my video flagged just for mentioning it that once. But anyway, we are going to be talking about The Mandalorian as we are looking forward to new season in October. And we have not yet talked about The Mandalorian at all on the channel. So I thought this would be a good time. We all have lots of time on our hands and lots of stuff to say about this particular thing. Joining me today, as you see here, we've got our council members, Ben Judkins, Jared Miracle, and my partner, Matthew. How you doing, everybody?
Excellent.
Doing well.
All right. So, Mandalorian, I'll kind of set us up, is ridiculously popular amongst fans, non-fans, newcomers, oldcomers, all of that kind of stuff. It's arguably the least controversial Star Wars property out there right now. You don't find many people who don't really like it. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that, which we will obviously get to. But one of the things that we'll kind of focus on is the reason that is as we've been talking here, as other people have been talking here, this feels so much like the original Star Wars adventures. And, you know, wherever you started, it has that DNA, it has that underlying base that is so strong. This is a completely unique and original story, right? Yes, you're getting some characters that are kind of like moving in and out of it or whatever, but generally speaking, they're all new characters, all this stuff. And this feels even more Star Wars than so much other stuff. Many people argue than even the last movie, which, who knows, right? Right now, it seems like Star Wars is getting a lot more popular in its shows, in its, you know, short format into long format type of stuff. So anyway, we are going to be speaking about that. As I was saying, one of the things is it has that DNA. So what is it? What are we talking about when we say that? What are we drawing on?
So maybe I can start us off here.
Yes.
You know, yeah, this is universally popular, and in a sense, it also builds off of the popularity of the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels. And one of the things that I find myself wondering in terms of the DNA of Star Wars is, yeah, this is fantastically popular. We've made a lot of good movies, but is this something that inherently works better in a short format, right? You know, this is coming out of that world of Flash Gordon reels, and, you know, it's like, you know, kind of B-roll Hollywood movies that tend to be short, that tend to be serialized. Is there something in the Star Wars DNA that is more friendly to short serialized storytelling? You know, can you do more with it?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I hadn't even thought of that. Is that the connection to Flash Gordon and to serialized things? Now, granted, we're not getting many cliffhangers episode to episode in this particular season. Maybe we'll get more, whatever. But I mean, the season finale cliffhanger is pretty good.
That is a good one, especially if you're into lightsabers.
Yep. Getting that dark saber out there. It's the first time it's been seen in real life, right? It's always been animated.
I think there's a lot to be said for telling these stories in George Lucas often built off of the concept of you don't know what happened last week. So even when you get the entirety of the story, he intentionally started off in episode 4 because he wanted you to have that, and it plays into to that used universe concept. So
Hmm.
we don't know very much about the background of these characters, and it's so the universe feels so familiar and lived in that you get the sense you should know or you should have access to information, but you don't, and that really builds a genuine kind of mystique.
That's really true. So, my parents, who were in their 70s, loved The Mandalorian. I think mostly because of Baby Yoda. Like, man, did they love it. But that twist at the end with, the dark saber showing up, that got them so much that I ended up talking them through that they went back and they watched all of Star Wars Rebels so that they
Wow.
could learn what a Mandalorian was and what a dark saber was, to kind of be able to frame that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if you got my parents to do that, that, like, you deserve some kind of Hollywood medal right there, right? You just won the entertainment Olympics.
Right. Yeah.
So
No. Go ahead.
what is it about the Mandalorians that makes them so, I don't know, attractively mysterious? Because even if we look back at the original trilogy, Boba Fett draws in all this attention right from the get-go because we don't know anything about him. But nobody made such a big stink about Bosk, right? So what is it about Mandalorians that pulls people in like that?
I don't know. I mean, I think there's part of it is because the Mandalorian was not a word I don't think was ever used in the original trilogy.
No.
It was a costume direction. It was that he was supposed to be wearing old Mandalorian armor, and I don't even know how that got out. Um, but then he was in that cartoon, and I don't remember the cartoon very well in the holiday special. Um, but yeah, the Mandalorian. I mean, Boba Fett. Yeah, he's armor, right? As a kid, right? You can be under that armor. Anybody can be under that armor. Doesn't matter who you are. You know, sex, race, whatever. You know, you don't know who's under there, and that's that. Now, does that translate to the Mandalorians? Yeah, probably a little bit. What I think is really cool about, especially this, and about the way they're treating Mandalorians in the whole of the Star Wars universe, is they're changing, right? The Mandalorians in the Clone Wars are pacifists, right? And then there's Death Watch, which is on its, you know, doing its thing for the uh, traditional Mandalorian, but so they have the armor and all that kind of stuff. Then you flash forward into Rebels, and that whole thing has sort of kind of muddied up a little bit. And then you get to here, and you have this tradition of they don't take off their helmets, and that's never been mentioned before. And in fact, in both Rebels and in Clone Wars, they're constantly taking off their helmets. That's not a thing. So we don't even know where that comes. So every time you meet the Mandalorians in the Star Wars universe, something's different, drastically different, and you don't know, right? And to what you were saying too, it's like the uh, the used future, the past, right? Like they don't know exactly who the Jedi are, you know. So there's like there's gaps. So, anyway, I found that interesting.
I honestly think it's a T-shaped visor. I think it's not just that they have a helmet, but that helmet draws on iconography that we all know from art and history. And you can't place it exactly because, it could be, like an open face Saleh, but
Sure.
it could also be a Spartan helmet. It could, but it is ancient, right? And it's something that you can look at and that you can identify. And it's the one thing that seems to be consistent about, Mandalorian dress through all of this. And, there's kind of a giveaway in that, as the Jedi have developed, you see what the fans like and you latch onto it, right? So we get more and more and more lightsaber time in every new thing.
Mhm.
Well, with the Mandalorians, we're getting more and more helmet time to the point that, well, now they've been subsumed by the helmet, right? It's gone from being a piece of ordnance to it is their religion.
Mhm.
That's true. Whenever we see the active myth building happening is when Star Wars becomes more interesting. When Phantom Menace came out, we all thought we understood the concept of the lightsaber, and we were all pretty comfortable with it and what to expect. And then Darth Maul shows up, and oh wow, his lightsaber has two blades, and that just flipped the whole world on its head.
Yeah. The with
It's
oh, go ahead.
it's also it's revelation. I mean, we were first introduced to Boba Fett as just the nameless, well, not nameless, he had a name, but the mysterious bounty hunter.
Right.
And there was so little known about who he was, where he came from, and people want to understand their environment. They want to know more about what's going on in their world, and now we are getting more looks, more information about the people behind the mask.
Yes. Yeah. So like the elements that they're drawing from with Star Wars, with the used future, everything's even the stormtroopers are used. Their armor is all scuffed up and dirty, all that kind of thing. And I love, and if you've watched the making of documentaries that they've had on, have you seen those?
Couple
Disney
of them.
Gallery.
Yeah, the Disney galleries. They purposefully are making them terrible shots. So if you know that, because that's a joke, obviously with all Star Wars fans, that stormtroopers can't hit anything. So they've really pushed that up, and so if you look at that scene where he's rescuing the child and he's coming through, they're point blank range, and they're missing him. They're like choo choo, the blades are going right past him. Every now and then they hit him in the shoulder. But I thought, and then of course
on the speed bikes.
So there's lots of there's not only the regular fan stuff, but there's also the kind of sort of breaking the fourth wall type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Giving a little wink to the audience.
Well, I think the audiences like to be in conversation with the thing that they're watching, and it certainly gives you that.
Oh yes, definitely. So we talked about the cereal. That was an interesting thing. So the other thing that obviously this is drawing from is, and we can go to either one of these, Westerns and samurai films, right? And in a lot of cases, specific ones. Obviously from Westerns, The Man with No Name, the stranger that walks in, out of there, that translates to Yojimbo in Japan, and Sanjuro, those two movies, which are essentially based on The Man with No Name. So it's really the same character, and this is a very nice continuation, and it's a really, really great way of bringing all of these kind of Star Wars themes together. And that has always tickled me with that kind of thing. But let's take the Man with No Name, right? Because that's something that's really, really central to the Mandalorian, right? Is the lone gunman. which is a different context to us, but you know what I mean. The lone gunslinger.
Yeah, I don't know how many people watched The Lone Gunman back in, what was that, 2000?
Oh, I wasn't even talking about that. I was talking about the actual lone gunman. But
Oh, okay. Man, that phrase has history.
yeah, it does.
Well, it is interesting how directly they reference it. I mean, you know, when else except in Kurosawa films and a handful of like, you know, kind of really esoteric westerns, are you introduced to a main character whose name you don't know? Right? He's not Bob. He's the Mandalorian. Right? That's it. That's not really a name. Mando isn't really a name. When, and of course he has a name, but for the audience, he's Mando.
Mm-hmm.
You know, throughout the show. You know, and so all that you're left with then is the image that he projects through his body. And you know, you can dive deeper into that. I was, you know, listening to one of these making of things where they were talking about you know, the stunt guy who was kind of having to develop a walk, and it turned out, you know, of course, he is John Wayne's grandson.
Yep.
So they're asking him, well, like, how would your grandfather walk? And he's imitating him. And so you're creating a, you know, deep visual references that no one can quite put their finger on.
Right.
No one looked at that and said, oh, it's the Duke. But like subconsciously, you all knew what that walk meant. That kind of shoulders forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you ask somebody to walk like John Wayne,
Mm-hmm.
they will do some sort of ape of that particular walk.
Which, by the way, works great when you're wearing a lot of armor. So, you know, perfect.
Right. Yeah.
Or if your piriformis is acting up, it really works wonders.
Yes. Yeah, but there's actually three guys in the suit, right? You've got Pedro Pascal. You've got, but yeah. So and then there's the stunt guy who does the martial arts, and I guess he's a capoeira guy. So he's doing all that, you know, stuff. It's really interesting to see how they're integrating the martial arts into this and the fighting.
Oh, absolutely.
The fighting in the
thoroughly
action is top notch. It's just
yeah.
it's so much better than anything else in the Star Wars universe. I mean, you have to. For me, there's a lot of salt I have to ingest to watch those lightsaber battles, you know. Whereas these fights are compelling, they're exciting, they're dynamic, you know.
So, what's everyone's favorite fight? What is your favorite Mandalorian fight?
Definitely Mando versus Cara Dune. Outside the bar when they're ultimately pinning one another against the wall and she body slams them.
Yeah.
Absolute brilliant use of an actor's innate ability. You know, Gina Carano has skill, and she has a very particular set of skills. And instead of asking her to fight like Darth Maul or something, they basically just put her in the scene and said, go. And so she fought the way that Gina Carano would fight, and that makes it look so organic. Plus, anytime you can fit a body slam into a Star Wars, I mean, it's come on, Star Wars Pro Wrestling. You can't get any better than that.
Yeah, I'm a little. This has always gotten me for that fight. Yeah, it's really cool. I like it a lot, and you know, thematically, it works totally. The one thing that happens in that fight that is a little bit of a pet peeve for me is people punching helmets. I cannot stand seeing that in movies. Everybody does it, but it's just like at least elbow, not fist. I mean, like she like falls off like pang, pang, and it's like okay.
I've got to imagine that her gauntlets are made of some kind of, I don't know, adamantium type material that prevents her from breaking her fists.
My point is you should at least indicate that somehow, like have sparks come out, or you know, or have a weird womp sound or you know. But other than that, as far as my favorite fight, I'm gonna have to say the Mandalorian versus the droids in the prison.
That is a good one.
Yeah,
Really
because
good.
that's one of those scenarios where it's like, okay, how would you do that? Like, what would you do if you're going up against droids who are designed to fight and to guard things and stuff like that? How do you overcome that? You know, and you see the use of the Beskar armor.
My only issue with that one is the speed of the droids. Right. Anyone who's done a little bit of robotics before would look at that and think pretty slow motor or servo or what have you, depending on their construction. But it doesn't really make sense if you're comparing speeds. They should just be able to blast through. So that's another case where an explanation would maybe be useful.
Yeah.
That raises the question I keep having is, what's the accelerant in his flamethrowers? If he's using that to put down droids and people in armor, what's he burning?
True, but the as far I think there's kind of a subtle explanation of that thing with the droids, because remember, IG-11 moves like that. He moves like a machine. He does not move like any sort of human being, right? Like, they did such an amazing job with the IG unit. I mean, it's like, okay, you've made sense of how crazy it looks, you know, and it makes it dangerous, you know, whereas before it's just like, what is the, you know, the IG-88 is a statue that has like a rotating thing right here, but that's it, you know. So the fact that they're able to do this, and then it has this really, really mechanical movement and everything like that.
It becomes almost like a classic horror movie monster.
Yeah.
Because you have, like, the mummy. The mummy is not intimidating in its motions, and yet you can't stop it.
Right, and then there's also the fact that it looks like an actual, like, industrial robot that builds cars. You know, like, where it's like, you know, there's no grace or whatever or anything like that. And then with all the ways it can swivel, and, you know, it makes perfect sense. So I was really impressed with that. But anyway, Ben, how about you?
My favorite fight is actually, I mean, I thought a lot about this. I love the quality of martial arts that we have in The Mandalorian. I mean, your martial arts, this is really fantastic. I like the one with the armorer versus the stormtroopers.
Hey, Mando. Where are they? I said, where are they?
Because, you know, I felt, you know, it's in the final episode, you know, when they come in and they're going to interrogate her or shoot her, I felt that you kind of learned something important about the Mandalorians and about kind of her as a leader of this community. You spend a lot of time saying, you know, this is the way, this is the way, this is the way, right? But what is the way really, other than that, you know, one specific situation that you happen to be talking about at the moment? And I thought that fight revealed something to the audience, and that the stormtroopers are coming in and you expect that this is going to be some kind of like honorable death scene, which is part of the samurai ethos, right? You're in a samurai movie, you could see that happen. But it turns out no, the way it looks a lot like Filipino martial arts and like breaking knees with wrenches, right? It's just incredible. It's like, I know something about Mandalorians I did not know before, right? Fully versed in Kali, check.
Oh yeah, no, that is a great one. I think it really, for me, puts the armor as one of my favorite characters. I really, really dig the fact that those culverts are all centered around this one kind of wise person, and then that person is an armorer, a weapon maker. I mean, that makes perfect sense. And then when he says, I can't give my weapon away, it's my religion,
Mm-hmm.
So. How about Matthew?
We've talked about the favorite fights, and I can never pick a favorite. But I want to go back and talk about to rescue the child early on.
Oh yeah.
I think that was a really, that was our first real insight into the versatility and the capability that Mandalorians are capable.
True. I mean, technically, yeah. I mean, technically, they really started off right from the opening scene. Mando is kicking ass and taking names from moment one. The opening scene is him walking into a bar, and just, with no F's to give, as it were. But yeah, totally. I mean, there's so many good fights, just unbelievable. Really, really good action that serves the plot and doesn't seem arbitrary. And even the stuff with Ming-Na Wen in when they were on Tatooine, it was small,
Mm-hmm.
but it communicated what it needed to communicate. And maybe that's a little influence, very small influence, maybe from more Hong Kong Chinese sources and stuff like that. Because I know a few of the directors are really into Hong Kong cinema, and worked on Clone Wars too, and brought a lot of that stuff in there. Because I was always thought that like Clone Wars era, like before Star Wars, like the old era, should be like a wuxia movie, right? With people flying everywhere and using force powers and exploding things and everything like that. So I dug that part about the Clone Wars. They were doing a lot of that. But anyway, the same thing here. Everything's stripped down, like even the fighting. It's just, you can tell that some people have background and some people are trained and some people are a little bit more dangerous than others, but it's all just rough and tumble. It looks like everything else in the universe. Tattered, worn, used.
I think just in the comments, in some ways, all of the capability and the lethality also underscores those times when he or other characters are not winning. It's not that these are unstoppable killing machines, because we have those moments where people get hurt, people lose, and that ties very well into the overall telling of this story.
Yes, you have, people get injured, people are, there's a vulnerability that is I think pretty part and parcel to what I think people are doing in the thing. And I think that's a good transition to our other little elephant in the room, right? The most popular part about the Mandalorian for most people, one person here is an exception. Um, Baby Yoda, the child, right? Revealed on the first in the first episode as the mark is what everybody is after, you know. Um, and it was a surprise, I think, for everybody. Not only because we didn't expect it to be, something like that, right? But who expected them to bring back the mystery of Yoda's species?
It was an impressive job of corporate skullduggery on their part. I don't know how, but apparently Jon Favreau managed to convince Bob Iger not to merchandise it right away.
Yeah, yep. That was that was I think because they didn't they spoil something with the toys in either Last Jedi or Force Awakens?
Always.
Well, they
Always spoil.
every movie, every series, something is spoiled because of how long it takes to produce that stuff.
Right. Yeah. So yes, no, yeah. This guy, I remember when they announced that they're making this guy. They said it's not going to be ready till May. Like what? Really? Okay. And I was at Galaxy's Edge in February, beginning of March, and no Baby Yodas anywhere.
Capitalism has failed me.
Yeah, right. But no, you're right, and I think they were pretty confident that they would sell them all. I think because of the whole thing, but yeah, but it's the child in there, Baby Yoda, putting such a thing in the middle of this thing. It's been done before. It's, again, if we want to talk about an influence, it is directly taking from the comic or manga and movie series Lone Wolf and Cub, which is one of my favorite samurai series in both manga and live action, where you have a disgraced samurai who is roaming the countryside as a Ronin mercenary with his young not toddler son, and of course in the samurai thing he's got a baby cart that's got all kinds of weapons in it and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things about that series which is so interesting is that you have Daigoro, who's the child, and you have Ogami Ito, who's the father, and he's on this path which he calls the demon way, and that requires him to sometimes neglect his child, to put his child on out on its own, and to expect that child to expect to die and not be afraid of it and all that kind of stuff. So you have this child who is going through all this extremely horrific stuff, not just the killing and the dueling, right? But the situations that they end up in are with people who have just terrible stories and all that kind of thing. That's being mirrored, I think, a lot in this for a specific purpose, because you have the Mandalorian who has the mask on, right? One of the things, and you can speak to this too, Jared, too, even if you don't necessarily like the cuteness and all of that kind of thing of it, it adds for me, and for a lot of people, I think, it adds that aspect of risk, that there's something that is being risked, that there's a vulnerability that is here. And even though the child has force powers and can do this, it can't do it all the time, right? And so it's a burden. And but it's an interesting narrative type of thing. How do we feel about these things?
Every story needs its Maltese Falcon. And in this particular case, I think you're right that the particular MacGuffin of the child is representative of potential lost innocence and having something more idealistic that you're trying to protect. it's interesting too. I think the show in that particular capacity speaks to parents, because it's my understanding, based on knowing a lot of parents but not being one, uh, that you often have this sort of innate desire to give your kids anything that you yourself didn't have.
Yes.
And so we look at the implied history in those flashbacks that we do have of the Mando's own personal past, is that his childhood was basically ruined when his family died. And so he grows up in this, what ostensibly, as far as we know so far, is a violent cult of the Mandalorians. And so is he going to try to give the child a more peaceful existence than he had?
Right. And if
It's
we
also,
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to throw out the historical note that the Lone Wolf and Cub, the baby cart samurai, it is very loosely inspired by real events in the history of Japan. It was not uncommon to purposely expose small children to gruesome things, like if someone were executed for crimes, their head would be put on a pike to be viewed in public, and parents would take their children down to view it up close and in detail, to desensitize them to the realities of life at that time. There are a lot of stories in the Japanese martial arts of that happening as recently as World War II. If your family were lineage holders of a particular martial arts style, it wasn't uncommon for Dad to wake you up early one morning, take you down to the village so that you could see all the dead bodies.
Yeah. Ito goes a little further. He creates the dead bodies in front of him.
Brutal, with the exploding stuff and the spikes shooting out from the baby cart. Very interesting.
Yeah. That would be quite the potpourri for a child psychologist to unwind. But
kind of different, but kind of actually on the same line. So, help me out. The group that rescues the Mandalorian as a child, is that Death Watch? Because I'm looking at their armor. That kind of looks like he got rescued by Death Watch.
Yep, they are Death Watch. There are 2 Mandos that I see in that crowd that actually have the Death Watch symbol on their pauldron. So yes, they are Death Watch. Absolutely, 100%. They're either Death Watch or they're Death Watch and like a mixed type of thing. But I think at the end of the Clone Wars, it was Death Watch.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because that's when that would have happened, because of the battle droids.
Right.
So, yeah, no, I was going to mention that as well, that he got rescued by Death Watch.
So he grows up in a terrorist training camp. Check.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But at this point, we don't know what exactly happened to Mandalore. Moff Gideon talks about the siege of Mandalore, which we see at the end of the Clone Wars, sort of.
Well, we see setting up for something really bad happening in Rebels. Clearly the story of the Darksaber is not going to be a happy story, and maybe you should have just left the damn thing on Maul's shrine.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of mysteries, and I think when you mentioned the Maltese Falcon, one of my favorite movies, Baby Yoda as being a Maltese Falcon or a MacGuffin. I guess he's not really a true MacGuffin, because he's really integrated into things and he actually affects change and stuff like that. However,
Bob MacGuffin.
They play on the mystery of where Yoda comes from, right? And they're playing on this, what is this thing? It does stuff, but we know nothing about it until the armorer says that really awesome thing about, there are these stories of these wizards called Jedi that were enemies of us and all that kind of stuff. And he says, so you want me to bring this child to a race of enemy sorcerers? This is the way. But it's so right there, that's a great payoff for me, because it's seeing somebody. Everybody who knows about Star Wars is all about Jedi, Sith, about the dark side, about the Force, and everything like that. Big galaxy. Not everybody's going to believe that. Not everybody's going to know any of this stuff. So the fact that they almost completely divorced the story from the main thread that we're so used to with Star Wars here, and they're only just referring to it, you know. So it's kind of hinting, where is it going to cross? Are they going to cross paths? We hear about Ahsoka maybe showing up. We have all these rumors buzzing about season 2, right? But I think Baby Yoda, the child, is one of these mysteries that, I hope it doesn't become like Gilligan's Island, right? Where they constantly, they almost got it, but nope, they don't.
Well, they only have 8 episodes at a time to play with, so it can't go full Gilligan's Island on us.
Exactly, right. Well, like Voyager, Star Trek Voyager went Gilligan's Island. That's Gilligan's Island in space.
Yeah.
Bad guy of the week.
Yeah.
I'm just hopeful that they don't fully explain the Yoda mystery.
Oh, me too. Yes. Yeah. I don't think they would.
I could see it ending very Gorillas in the Mist, where we have the Yoda species present somewhere, they take the child and then go off into who knows where.
Yeah, that would be good. You're
right, though. It's notable that not only The Mandalorian, but even The Force Awakens is trying to point out that, yes, we've had all these movies about Jedi versus Sith, but that's a very tiny part of life in the universe, and not everyone even knows about it.
Right.
Yep. Well, it might be worth asking then why one works better than the other. And I think Star Wars is in an interesting position, because ever since, Empire came out, they've had to deal with the sequel problem more directly and more often than any other, modern Hollywood franchise, right? You'd have to go back to like Buster Keaton's serials to have more sequels, right? And some of the sequels work better than others. And The Mandalorian doesn't position itself as being a sequel, but that's why it works. And I think that what did it recapture of the original Star Wars-ness? To me, it doesn't feel as much like Episode 4. It feels like Episode 5. It is Star Wars when you had this great story that you loved, that you were really enthusiastic about, and a sequel came out and you thought you knew where it was going to go, but it went somewhere else and everybody was happy with it, right? We haven't had that in Star Wars in a long time. And this notion that we are going to do a follow-on story, but we aren't going to follow the same threads that you think we are. We're actually going to go someplace different in this universe and see something new in this universe. I think that was what really struck a major chord with Star Wars fans. I love Jedi as much as anybody else, right? But the ability to step away from, the canon characters and kind of the canon storylines, even, if you will, that's, I think, what made this powerful. It was subverting expectations in a very positive way.
I think it's worth noting too that if we're talking about Empire, when Empire was released, it had mixed reviews.
Mm-hmm.
Now we all love it, of course, because it's Empire Strikes Back. But if you look at some of the original critical articles at the time, there were people really ripping into it.
Oh yeah, even as like
folks hated 3PO back then.
Yeah, well, I remember when I was
Jar Jar.
Yeah, when I was a kid, seeing Empire for the first time, at the end of it, it was like the end of Infinity War. That's the only thing that was the only time that I felt the same type of cinematic effect. Right?
All the air was out of the room.
Huh?
I just, all the air went out of the room. It was what just happened to us?
Yeah. Right. Because you see it, okay, he gets his hand cut off, he falls down the thing, everything like that. And then the credits roll, and you're like, wait, wait, that's it? Like, the bad guys win? What?
Well, and especially these days because we don't have risk takers in filmmaking, right? Like at that time, you also had people like Spielberg who are releasing movies. You don't know what to expect the first time you go to see E.T. or Jaws or what have you. But now everybody knows what to expect of a movie. When I go see Fast and the Furious Part 21, I know exactly beat for beat how that film is going to go.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like that hasn't ever existed in, before. We have the screwball comedy, we have all kinds of genres which would do that. The thing about that subversion of expectation right there. Darth Vader's Luke's father, bad guys win in Empire, Han Solo, who knows what's going to happen to him, everything like that. Again, what you say, that's one of those classic cliffhangers too, of that. But back then, we didn't know if there was a third one coming. It wasn't a foregone conclusion that they were going to make a third one, that they were going to finish this thing. That's why he made the first one as just a single movie, as a standalone movie. Because nobody thought that this was going to, and like you said, even Empire comes out and people, many people were very not happy with it. And then, like you said, after a while, that's what becomes the fun part about it, is that second act, that classic second act where everybody's down. Now are they going to do these in acts? Like, this seems a very good arc for an act, but who knows? We'll see what season 2 has in store for us. All right. So, well, that's a pretty good overview, I think. Do we have anything else that we want to mention?
Well, not directly about the Mandalorian season 2, but we're getting not quite Clone Wars season 8. The Bad Batch are getting their own show.
Oh, right. Yeah. The Bad Batch.
Nobody's exactly sure what to expect of it, other than that one announcement that they're apparently going to become mercenaries in the period shortly after the war.
Sounds fun. I thought the Bad Batch was a really fun arc. It was, yeah. I just thought it was, again. And there's another thing. Just like with Rogue One, Rogue One, classic war movies, which is another one of those things from there. Here's another drawing in of that same thing. So yeah, Bad Batch. That's going to be animated though, right?
One would imagine.
Yeah.
They haven't really announced.
All going to be Tamura Morrison. In different costumes.
We can only hope.
Yeah. Well, I suppose you could use Maori actors who generally resemble each other, because the Bad Batch, they don't look identical.
That's true. They're all sufficiently different.
Yeah. So you could have Tamura Morrison and maybe, find his nephew or something like that.
Get a couple of rugby players.
Yeah, exactly. Just throw them in there. Anyway.
So while we don't know anything about the sort of timbre of the show, I was a huge fan of the A-Team when I was a kid, so I'm hopeful that it will turn out similar to that.
Yeah. The Dirty Dozen, all these team. I like that team, the team trope, show or whatever.
Every week they'll turn something into a tank.
Yeah, right, something. Yeah, it'll be cool. I think it was an interesting choice, for them to go that way. But we'll see how that works too. That also brings us to the other thing. We will be back to talk about the final arc of the Clone Wars as well, because that is a big one. It was a fantastic arc. Everything about it was great. We have a lot to talk about that, so we'll come back with that one for you. So for right now, I guess we'll end it there. I've got to get out there to eat, but yes, tune in for the for season 2 of The Mandalorian. We'll probably mention certain things like this about certain things with The Mandalorian as well coming up. Yeah, everybody's very excited about it. We're seeing a lot of this stuff. We're seeing more martial arts, more of this kind of content getting in there so that people can get interested in this stuff. And yeah, we love it. So, all right. So that's our fan show for this month. Hopefully we'll have another one go. We're going to be starting up classes again back in August. I'm going to have a couple of workshops going, and then classes as usual in September online. We'll see what the future holds for in person. Anyway, I will leave you here. I thank our panelists here, Ben, Jared, Matthew. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody at home, for tuning in here, and we will see you on the flip side. Patience, practice, perseverance. Happy sabering.